I never thought this would happen to me. You always hear about these kinds of things happening to other people, but you never really expect them to hit close to home. But here I am, writing this out, trying to make sense of everything that's gone down. My name's Ryan, and I'm a 39-year-old guy who thought he had a solid, normal marriage. My wife, Katie, and I have been together for 12 years. We met when we were in college, and things were good. Really good. At least that's what I thought. Katie was this outgoing, beautiful woman who always kept me on my toes. I fell for her hard, and we got married a few years later. We've had a couple of moves over the years, but we settled down in this small beach town in North Carolina about 5 years ago. The pace was slower here, which we both loved. It was the kind of place where you knew everyone, where people stopped to chat on the street, and where the sound of the ocean was always in the background. But as time went on, things between Katie and me started to change, though I didn't fully realize it until it was too late. I started noticing little things, small shifts in her behavior that didn't sit right with me. She began to be less present when we were together, which was odd considering how close we used to be. She would spend hours on her phone in another room or out on the porch, staring at the horizon, never really talking to me about what was going on in her head. At first, I thought maybe it was just stress. She's a teacher, and her workload had increased, plus she had this new project that she was obsessed with. She told me it was nothing to worry about. She always had an excuse for everything, which, looking back, should have been a red flag. But I believed her. I always believed her. I also noticed the distance growing between us. Intimacy had become infrequent, and, when it did happen, it was like she was just going through the motions. I tried not to make a big deal about it. After all, life gets busy, right? But it started to feel like I was the one doing all the work in our relationship. I was the one initiating, the one trying to make plans for us to reconnect. I'd suggest going for a walk along the beach, or getting dinner at that little seafood place in town, but she always seemed to have a million reasons why she couldn't. She was too tired, or had a headache, or she had to work late on lesson plans. It became this repetitive cycle. We were roommates more than a married couple. I don't want to say that I didn't notice some of the obvious signs that things were off. I did. It's just that I didn't want to see them. I kept convincing myself that everything was fine. I thought maybe it was just a phase. I figured, hey, she's just busy with work and the stress of life. But as the months passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Katie wasn't really here with me anymore. I still loved her deeply, but she seemed different. I guess I didn't want to believe it. I kept brushing it aside, excusing her behavior, rationalizing it. But the truth was, I had been blind to it for so long. What's the saying? You can't see the forest for the trees. That was me. Too focused on small excuses, ignoring the bigger picture, until one day, everything came crashing down. To be honest, I wish I could say I saw the affair coming, but I didn't. There were moments, sure, little things that made me uneasy, like the fact that Katie had started going to the bar more often. And I mean, more than usual. She's always enjoyed a drink here and there, but she'd never been one to spend whole evenings at the bar. Yet, over the last few months, that's exactly what she did. And when I asked her about it, she always gave me the same answer. It's just a chance to unwind, Ryan. It's not a big deal. The problem was that I didn't know anyone who worked at that bar, so it wasn't like I could just drop by and check things out. I didn't want to be the suspicious, overbearing husband, so I let it slide. But then I found something I wasn't supposed to see. Something that shattered everything I thought I knew about our relationship. Something that opened my eyes to the truth. It all started with the tablet. One evening, Katie asked me to check her email for something. Her phone was dead, and she didn't want to deal with it. So she handed me her tablet and asked me to find a confirmation for an event she'd been invited to. It was a simple request, nothing out of the ordinary. But as I scrolled through the screen, I noticed something strange. A text really, from someone named Jake. I didn't think much of it at first. People have contacts with strange names all the time, right? But as I read through the exchange, my stomach dropped. The conversation wasn't about an event, or work, or anything normal. It was flirty, it was intimate, and it was clear that Katie and Jake had been meeting up in secret. I didn't need to read the whole conversation to understand what was going on. The messages were just too telling. Can't wait to see you again tonight, one read. I'll be waiting for you at the bar, like always, said another. And then there was one that made my blood run cold. I miss you. This secret is killing me, but I love every minute of it. I froze. My heart stopped, and my mind raced. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of mistake, but the more I read, the more I realized that I was looking at the proof of something I had been trying so hard to ignore. Katie had been seeing someone else. And from the sound of it, this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was an ongoing affair, and it was happening with someone who worked at the very bar she'd been frequenting for weeks. I sat there in stunned silence, my head spinning, my entire world suddenly flipping upside down. The woman I thought I knew, my wife, my partner, had been living a lie. And I didn't have the faintest idea. But what really killed me, what made everything worse, was how deep it went. How much I hadn't seen. I sat there, holding Katie's tablet, staring at the screen, my mind racing and trying to piece together something. Anything that could explain what I was reading. The messages between her and Jake were more than just casual exchanges. They were laced with something far deeper. There was a connection between them that I couldn't ignore. It was the kind of intimacy that spoke volumes in a way words alone couldn't. My hands started shaking, and I felt this sickening wave of nausea wash over me. I kept hoping, praying, that maybe I was misunderstanding it all, that I was reading too much into these texts, but I knew deep down that there was no way I could be wrong. The proof was right there, in black and white, and I felt like an idiot for never seeing it before. At that moment, everything came rushing back to me. Every little change in Katie's behavior, every offhand comment she'd made that I'd chalked up to nothing. Her late nights at the bar, the way she'd become so distant, the way she'd shut me out more and more as time went on. I remembered her excuses about being too tired to do anything, or the way she'd often say she was working when she was really out with friends, or God knows who else. There was a part of me that had tried to deny it, to hold on to the idea that we were fine, that we were just in a rut, but now I could see that it wasn't a rut at all. Katie had been having an affair, and I had been too blind or too trusting to see the signs. I felt this intense pressure building in my chest, like I couldn't breathe, like I was going to explode from the inside out. I put the tablet down and ran my hands over my face. It felt surreal, like I was in some twisted dream where nothing made sense. I wanted to throw the damn thing across the room, to destroy all the evidence that was staring me in the face, but I couldn't. I just kept staring at it, the weight of it all settling in. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about the complete and utter destruction of everything I thought I knew. The love I thought we shared, the life we built together, all of it felt like a lie now. And what stung the most wasn't just that she had been with someone else, but that she had managed to hide it so well from me for so long. She had lied. She had lied to my face, over and over, and I had never seen it. I kept reading the messages. The more I did, the angrier I got. There were mentions of places they'd been together, things they'd done. There was one message from Jake that made my stomach twist. I know it's wrong, but it feels so right when I'm with you. It was one thing to be cheated on. It was another to realize that the person you trusted most had been living a double life. They had been seeing each other behind my back, sneaking around like it was some secret love story. I couldn't stop myself from feeling like a fool. And then the worst part, the guilt. I couldn't help but wonder, how long had this been going on? How many times had I walked right past the signs, dismissing them as nothing? How many times had I asked her what was wrong, only to have her brush me off with a tired excuse? As if on autopilot, I found myself reaching for my phone. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions, but one thing was crystal clear. I had to confront her. I couldn't just sit here and let this fester any longer. I needed answers. I needed the truth. The anger inside of me was boiling over, and I felt like I was about to lose control. But at the same time, a small part of me, deep down, was terrified. I didn't want to hear the truth. I didn't want to hear Katie admit to the affair, to shatter the image I'd built of our life together. But I knew I had no choice. I couldn't live in this lie any longer. So, I texted her, asking her to come home right away. The message was short, but the urgency of it felt suffocating. I stared at the screen, watching the little typing indicator blink, waiting for her to respond. When Katie came through the door about 30 minutes later, I was still sitting there, the tablet lying on the coffee table between us. She looked surprised to see me sitting in the living room, but there was no hint of guilt on her face. She walked in like everything was fine, almost too casually. I'm not sure what I expected, maybe a nervous glance or some sign that she knew something was wrong, but she didn't act like anything was out of place. I told her to sit down. She didn't ask why, didn't even question it. She just did as I asked, and the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was already preparing herself to lie. I wanted to be calm. I wanted to ask her what was going on without jumping to conclusions, but how could I? The proof was right there, in front of me. I was holding it in my hands. I took a deep breath and set the tablet down in front of her. Katie's expression changed as soon as she saw what was on the screen. The confidence she'd walked in with faltered, just for a moment, before she quickly masked it with a practiced smile. "What's this?" she asked, and I could hear the nervousness in her voice, even if she was trying to hide it. I didn't answer her right away. I just looked at her, my chest tight with emotion, feeling the anger bubbling up. This was it, the moment of truth. And, God, I was terrified. For a long time, we just sat there, staring at each other. She kept her gaze locked on the screen, avoiding my eyes. And then, in the most casual tone, as if she had no idea why I was so upset, she said, "Oh, Jake? He's just a friend from the bar. We've been hanging out, but it's nothing." She said it like it was no big deal, like I should just accept it and move on. But I couldn't. I felt my blood start to boil. "It's nothing, huh?" I asked, my voice a little louder than I meant it to be. "Is that why you've been sneaking around behind my back, meeting up with him in secret? Why you've been lying to me for months, Katie?" Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her composure. She hesitated, but only for a moment, before her default reaction kicked in. She started backpedaling, her voice sharp now, defensive. "Ryan, you're overreacting. You're being ridiculous." I couldn't believe it. This was how she was going to handle it? By brushing me off like I was the crazy one? That was Katie's MO, always deflecting, always making me question my own sanity, even when the facts were right in front of me. She lied so effortlessly, so convincingly, that for a second, I thought maybe she had me fooled again. But I wasn't buying it anymore. At that moment, I realized the truth. She had been lying to me, not just about the affair, but about everything. About her feelings, about her life, about us. And it stung. It stung in a way I can't even describe. Because this wasn't just about a betrayal of trust, it was about realizing that I had been living with someone who had never really been honest with me. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating even, as Katie's defensive walls went up. I could feel the heat rising inside of me, the anger and the hurt bubbling over, and I wasn't sure how much longer I can keep it in check. Her calmness, her attempt to downplay everything as if it were just some misunderstanding, was driving me crazy. I could feel the walls closing in on me, each second that passed making me feel more and more like I was suffocating. I wanted to scream at her, to throw everything in my path, to tear down the perfect image of our life that she'd managed to hide behind all these years. But instead, I just sat there, staring at her, trying to steady myself enough to form a coherent sentence. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. Her eyes kept darting back to the tablet, as though she were searching for a way out of this conversation. I could see the conflict in her face, but it wasn't guilt. No, it was the unmistakable discomfort of someone who had been caught red-handed and was now trying to find an escape route. I had expected her to deny it, to try to convince me that everything was perfectly fine, but nothing prepared me for the level of deflection she was about to throw at me. "Ryan, you're just so paranoid sometimes," she said, her voice rising slightly, trying to sound nonchalant. "I don't know what you're expecting me to say. There's nothing going on between Jake and me. We've been friends for years. You know this." It was infuriating to hear her lie like that. She said it with such conviction, as if she truly believed that I would buy it, as if the months of secrecy and late-night messages meant nothing. I knew she was trying to make me feel like I was the one in the wrong, trying to get me to second-guess myself, but it wasn't going to work. Not anymore. The anger inside me was growing, and I could feel my fists clenching involuntarily. "Katie, this isn't about being paranoid. This is about the fact that I've been sitting here, asking you repeatedly what's wrong, and you've kept telling me everything was fine. You've lied to me for months, and now I'm seeing all of this." I could hear the tremor in my own voice now, the mixture of frustration and hurt that I couldn't suppress. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't see what's really going on?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes flicking toward the floor. It was almost like she couldn't face me anymore, like she was trying to retreat into herself. "It's not what you think," she finally said, her voice quieter now, but still full of that familiar defensive edge. "Jake and we're just friends. It's not like that." She didn't even look me in the eyes when she said it, and that should have been another red flag. Her words were hollow, rehearsed, like she had said them so many times in her head that they no longer carried any real weight. She had rehearsed this, what to say, how to make it sound innocent, how to avoid the consequences of what she had done. And the worst part was, I could see through it. I could see the lies stacked up, one on top of the other, and I felt like I was drowning in them. I couldn't keep sitting there anymore, pretending like her lies didn't matter, pretending like I could just absorb the words she was feeding me. I stood up, pacing around the room, trying to make sense of everything. The feeling of betrayal was eating at me, gnawing at my insides. This wasn't just some casual mistake. This was a calculated decision to deceive me, to live a double life, and I couldn't get my head around it. The woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew, had been out there, behind my back, sharing her time, her energy, and God knows what else, with someone else. And for what? For some thrill? For some connection that she thought I couldn't give her? Don't you dare tell me it's nothing, Katie, I snapped, my voice rising in volume now, unable to control the frustration and anger that had been building up. You've been hiding this from me. This isn't some innocent friendship. I've been sitting here, waiting for you to tell me the truth, but instead, you just lie. And it's not just one lie, it's months of lies. And I don't know what hurts more, the fact that you've been seeing someone else behind my back, or that you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth when I asked. Katie's face was flushed now, her lips pressed into a thin line. I could tell she was getting defensive, but she wasn't backing down. She didn't look guilty, not the way I expected. She wasn't crying, she wasn't begging for forgiveness, and she wasn't even really apologizing. Instead, she looked almost annoyed, as if she were inconvenienced by the fact that I had caught her. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest, and she leaned back, her posture shifting into that familiar, cold, I don't care stance that always made me feel small. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. I've told you, Jake is just a friend. You need to stop being so controlling. Controlling. She said it like it was the worst thing I could be, like being hurt by her betrayal was somehow my fault. That word hit me like a slap in the face. It was classic Katie, though, always turning things around to make herself the victim, always twisting things to make me feel like I was the one doing something wrong. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes now, a mix of anger and disbelief. She didn't get it. She didn't get how deep this cut. This wasn't just about a friendship with Jake. It was about trust, about respect, about everything I thought we had together. I sat down again, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I was exhausted, emotionally drained from this entire conversation, and I could already feel the heaviness settling in. Katie was still standing there, arms crossed, staring at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. There was no apology, no remorse, just a cold detachment. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't going to get the closure I wanted from her. I wasn't going to get the apology, the honesty, the remorse. This was it. This was who she had become. The anger, the hurt, it was all-consuming. But there was also this hollow emptiness inside me, as if I were seeing everything I had believed in shatter into pieces right before my eyes. And as much as I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand an explanation, I couldn't bring myself to do it. What was the point? She wasn't going to give me one. She had already made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. The silence in the room was unbearable, thick with tension and the weight of unspoken words. I sat there, my hands resting limply in my lap, the anger and hurt mixing into a heavy, overwhelming fog that clouded my thoughts. Katie was still standing there, arms crossed, her eyes avoiding mine, as if pretending this wasn't happening would somehow make it go away. But it wasn't going away. The truth was out in the open now, and there was no way to undo it. I couldn't unsee what I had read on that tablet. I couldn't unknow what had been happening right under my nose. And as much as I wanted to reach for that anger, to hold on to it as something I could control, the sadness crept in like a slow-moving tide, pulling me under. It wasn't just the betrayal that hit me. It was the realization that everything I had believed in, everything I had trusted, was a lie. The shock of it all still hadn't worn off. Even though Katie was standing there, cold and defensive, a part of me couldn't fully accept it. It felt like I was living in some parallel reality where none of this made sense. We had built a life together. We had memories, we had dreams, we had plans. And yet, she had been hiding another life, one where I didn't exist. How long had she been building this? How long had she been living a double life? I had trusted her so completely, so fully, that I couldn't even fathom the idea of her keeping something so huge from me. I thought we had an understanding. I thought we communicated. But now, it was all in question. Had I been blind to the truth all along? Had I let her fool me into thinking everything was fine when it clearly wasn't? The guilt gnawed at me, and I felt a deep, unsettling sense of failure creeping in. I had failed myself for not seeing the signs. I had failed us by not demanding more from her, by not pushing harder when I felt something wasn't right. But then again, how could I have known? How could anyone have known when she was so good at hiding it? There was a part of me that wanted to cry bitter, ugly tears that would somehow let the flood of emotions out. But I couldn't. Crying felt too vulnerable, too raw, and I didn't want her to see me like that. I didn't want her to see how deeply she had hurt me, how much it stung to realize that she had been so willing to destroy everything we had for someone else. It wasn't just the affair, it was the dishonesty, the coldness with which she dismissed my feelings, the utter lack of empathy she showed in this moment. I thought I knew her, thought I understood her. But she wasn't the woman I had married. Not anymore. I couldn't help but wonder what else she had hidden from me, what other secrets she had tucked away. Was I so blind that I couldn't see her for who she really was? Was this how she had always been, only I hadn't been paying attention? The worst part was, despite everything, despite knowing the truth now, I still loved her. I didn't want to, but I did. And that made the pain even worse. How could I love someone who had betrayed me so completely? How could I still care about someone who had thrown away everything we had for someone else? My mind was a chaotic mess of questions I didn't have answers to, and I found myself spiraling into this pit of confusion. I was angry, yes, furious, even, but I was also heartbroken. The two feelings seemed to coexist in this twisted dance, feeding off each other, amplifying the hurt. And through all of that, the sadness was the most overwhelming. It was the kind of sadness that made it hard to breathe, like a weight pressing down on my chest. It was the realization that, no matter what happened next, things would never be the same again. She had changed everything. She had taken something so sacred, so personal, and turned it into something I couldn't even recognize anymore. It was funny, in a sickening way, how quickly everything changed. Just yesterday, I had been making plans for the weekend, talking about getting out of town, maybe taking a trip to the mountains or visiting friends. We had been talking about our future, about the next steps, about the things we still wanted to do together. But now, it felt like all of that was irrelevant. What was the point of talking about the future when the foundation we had built our lives on was cracked and crumbling? I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Every time I thought about her, every time I tried to picture us going back to how things used to be, all I could see was her with him, Jake. I couldn't even escape that image in my mind. They had been together, behind my back, and no matter how much I tried to suppress it, the thought of them together made my skin crawl. I hated that it had to be this way. I hated that she had done this to me, to us, to everything we had worked for. The truth was, I was drowning in anger and sadness, in this suffocating feeling of betrayal. It wasn't just about what she had done. It was about how she had turned me into a fool, how she had made me believe that everything was fine when it wasn't. It made me question everything, every single moment I had spent with her, every laugh we shared, every quiet night at home. How much of that was real? How much of it was just an act, a performance to keep me in the dark? I didn't know how to move forward from here. I didn't know how to fix this, or even if it could be fixed. A part of me wanted to try, wanted to hold on to whatever was left of our relationship, but another part of me, the smarter, more self-respecting part, knew that I deserved better than this. I deserved someone who would be honest with me, someone who would choose me and not sneak around behind my back. But the problem was, I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. I didn't know if I could ever look at her and not see the lies, the deception, the woman who had broken my heart in a way that no one ever had before. And that realization cut deeper than anything she could have ever said to me. Because I knew, in my gut, that things would never be the same. There was no going back from this. We were done. But what did that even mean? What came next? Was I supposed to walk away, to let her go and start over? Was I supposed to fight for us, to try and salvage whatever was left of our relationship? I didn't know. I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living in this lie. And as much as I loved her, as much as it hurt to admit it, I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. Not after everything she had done. Not after this. I spent the following days in a kind of numb haze. The initial shock was starting to wear off, but the emotional weight was still there, heavy and unyielding, sitting in my chest like a rock. I went through the motions of life, but everything felt distant, like I was watching it all unfold from behind a glass wall. Every time I saw Katie, it felt like I was seeing a stranger. I couldn't shake the image of her with Jake, the thought of their secret moments together. It haunted me, no matter how much I tried to push it away. Every time she tried to touch me, every time she spoke to me like things were normal, I recoiled inside. I couldn't connect with her anymore. I couldn't even look at her without the bitterness rising up in my throat. There were moments when I thought maybe I could find a way to forgive her, to try and rebuild whatever was left. I thought about the history we had together, the good times, the shared dreams. I thought about the life we'd built. And then I'd remember the lies. I'd remember the way she had turned her back on me for someone else, the way she had betrayed me so thoroughly, and I'd feel this crushing weight of doubt. Could I really rebuild something with her? Could I ever trust her again? Or was this just an illusion of a life we used to have, one that was now shattered beyond repair? I couldn't stop questioning everything. I couldn't stop wondering how much of our relationship had been real, and how much of it had just been a carefully constructed act. The decision I had to make was clear, but it wasn't easy. Part of me still wanted to believe in us. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could work through this, that with time and effort, we could heal. But another part of me, the part that was angry and hurt and tired, knew that staying in this relationship, trying to pretend like everything was okay, would only continue to eat away at me. I couldn't keep living in a state of constant suspicion, constantly wondering if she was being truthful or if I was just another pawn in whatever game she was playing. I couldn't keep waiting for her to change or for her to apologize in a way that would make it all better, because deep down, I knew she wasn't capable of giving me the closure I needed. She wasn't capable of giving me the honesty, the respect that I deserved. She had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how we could ever get past it. I had to let go. I had to. As much as it hurt to admit it, as much as the thought of losing her, losing the life I thought we had, gnawed at my insides, I knew I couldn't keep holding on to something that was broken beyond repair. I had spent too many months, too many years, second-guessing myself, trying to convince myself that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I had given her so many chances, so many opportunities to come clean, to be honest, but instead, she kept feeding me lies. She kept playing the part of the perfect wife while secretly living a completely different life. I couldn't live in that world anymore. It wasn't healthy for me. It wasn't fair to me. And most importantly, it wasn't who I was. I took a deep breath, sitting on the edge of our bed, Katie on the other side, her presence now more of a weight than anything comforting. She didn't even look at me as I made the decision. She just sat there, probably waiting for me to say something, to make some sort of move. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that we had a future together when it felt like our past had been nothing but a lie. The words I was about to say felt like they were tearing my insides apart, but I knew they had to be said. I couldn't keep delaying the inevitable. I turned to her, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me, and said, "Katie, I think we're done. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. You've broken my trust, and I don't think I can ever get it back." The words sounded final, but they didn't feel like it. Part of me wanted to take them back, wanted to say something softer, something that would keep the door open for reconciliation. But I couldn't. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own peace just to hold on to a relationship that was built on lies. She didn't respond right away. She just sat there, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her face a mask of anger and confusion. I couldn't tell if she was shocked, if she had expected this, or if she was just too numb to process it. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, frustration, maybe even regret, but it wasn't enough to make me second-guess my decision. The way she had acted, the way she had dismissed everything I felt, the way she had refused to take any responsibility for her actions, made it clear that there was no going back. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I had nothing left to give, and I couldn't keep hoping for something that would never come. Katie finally spoke, her voice tight with emotion. "You're just going to give up on us?" Just like that. The words stung, but I didn't flinch. I had already made my decision. "I'm not giving up on us, Katie," I said, my voice steady, even though I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "I'm giving up on the lies. I'm giving up on the person you've become. I can't keep living like this, always questioning, always wondering if you're being honest, if you're really here with me. I deserve more than that." She shook her head, her lips trembling as if she was about to cry, but the tears didn't come. Instead, she stood up and started pacing, clearly frustrated with everything that was happening. I didn't follow her, didn't try to stop her. I knew there was nothing left to say. The conversation had already ended, even if the finality of it hadn't quite hit her yet. I spent the rest of the day packing up my things, going through the motions of separating our lives. It felt surreal, like I was moving in slow motion, like I wasn't really in control of what was happening. But with each item I packed, with each piece of my life that I took with me, I felt a little lighter, a little more sure of my decision. This wasn't easy, not by any means. Walking away from her, from everything we had built, felt like ripping a part of myself away. But deep down, I knew it was the right choice. I had to take care of myself now. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness for someone who didn't value it. When I left, there were no dramatic goodbyes, no final arguments. Katie didn't chase after me, didn't beg me to stay. And that, in a way, hurt more than anything else. It felt like she had already checked out of this relationship long before I had made my decision. She had already moved on in her own way, and now it was my turn to do the same. The days following my departure were a blur of reflection, a whirlwind of emotions, and the kind of solitude that forces you to really look at yourself. I had to face the uncomfortable truth that, for all the years I had spent in that relationship, I had been living in a lie. I had allowed myself to stay in a place where my trust was constantly being tested, where my emotional needs were ignored, and where I had sacrificed so much of myself in an attempt to keep something alive that wasn't really there anymore. I had been so focused on keeping things intact, on holding on to the idea of the life we had built, that I had ignored the small cracks along the way, the little things that should have been red flags but were dismissed, often subconsciously, as normal. And now, looking back, I could see them all so clearly. The emotional distance, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the way Katie had shut me out in so many ways. It wasn't just Jake. It was everything. The affair was just the breaking point. It was the thing that cracked the dam open, revealing everything that had been festering under the surface for so long. I spent a lot of time in those first few weeks trying to make sense of what had happened. I had to deal with the guilt that I wasn't able to save my marriage, guilt that I hadn't been able to fix what was broken long before it got this far. I questioned myself relentlessly, wondering if I had been a bad husband, if I had done something to drive Katie away, if I could have done things differently. But eventually, I realized that the guilt was pointless. This wasn't on me. It wasn't my fault that she had made the choices she had made. I had tried. I had been patient, understanding, and loving. But in the end, Katie had chosen to betray my trust, to disregard everything we had worked for, and that was on her, not me. I couldn't keep carrying the weight of her actions. I had to accept that sometimes, no matter how much you try, things fall apart. People change, and relationships end. And as much as I hated to admit it, sometimes you can't fix things, no matter how much you want to. I also realized that this experience, this pain, had taught me something important about myself. I had learned what my boundaries were, what I was willing to tolerate and what I wasn't. I had learned that I deserved honesty, loyalty, and respect in a relationship, and that I wasn't willing to settle for anything less. I had been so willing to make excuses for Katie, to justify her behavior, to pretend like everything was fine, that I had lost sight of my own worth. The truth was, I had allowed myself to be treated like I wasn't enough. I had let someone lie to me, manipulate me, and break my heart, all while convincing myself that things would get better. But they didn't. They got worse. And once I let go of the guilt and stopped blaming myself, I started to heal. I started to see that I was better off on my own, that I deserved someone who would appreciate me, someone who would build with me, not tear me down. I'm not saying I have all the answers. I don't. I still struggle with the betrayal. There are still moments when I feel the sting of it, when I question my judgment, when I remember the good times and wonder if it was all just a facade. But I also know that I can't keep living in the past. I can't keep allowing the hurt to define me, to control my future. I have to move forward, and that means accepting what happened, no matter how much it hurts. It means acknowledging the pain, but not letting it consume me. There will be good days and bad days, days when I feel like I'm making progress, and days when it feels like I'm back at square one. But I know now that I have the strength to get through it. I know that I don't need to rely on anyone else to heal me. Looking back, I realized that what happened with Katie wasn't just about her or Jake. It was about me. It was about my own growth, my own journey toward understanding what I truly want in life and in a partner. And while the betrayal was excruciating, it opened my eyes to the fact that I was capable of moving on, capable of loving myself and accepting that sometimes the hardest decisions are the best ones. I don't regret walking away. In fact, I think it was the healthiest thing I could have done. I'm learning to embrace the space I've created for myself, to rediscover who I am without being defined by my relationship with someone else. And as I continue to move forward, I'll keep those lessons in mind. Trust is everything. Loyalty is everything. And the most important relationship I'll ever have is the one I have with myself. For anyone going through something similar, my advice is simple but hard to follow. Don't ignore the signs. Trust your gut. even when it feels like you're imagining things. You deserve to be loved and respected, and if someone can't give that to you, it's okay to walk away. You'll hurt, you'll doubt yourself, and you'll grieve what you thought was your life. But in the end, you'll come out stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. And while the pain doesn't go away overnight, it does fade. You will heal, and you will find peace again. It may take time, but you will. And when that happens, you'll be thankful that you made the hard choice. Because in the end, it's the only choice that matters, choosing yourself.